Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. I'm Aaron Schweitzer, your host, along with Central Oregon's most positive and enlightening reporter, Laurel Bronze. This podcast is powered by the Source Weekly, Bend's locally owned newspaper. This podcast is also generously supported by Worthy Brewing, putting education first, utilizing green technologies, and experimenting daily to brew the best damn beer in the Pacific Northwest, all while treading as lightly on the earth as possible, living out their mantra, Earth first, beer second. Our guest today is Stefanie Garber. Is that how you say it?
Correct.
Superintendent and elementary principal for the Culver School District. She established a partnership with Oregon State University Cascades to move the district to becoming a K through 12 STEM district, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. She gave a TED Talk in 2016 about the STEM program, which described how it introduced students to real-world learning opportunities. It has been a mentor for a number of her students who don't have stable families and provided access to housing, medical care, food, or clean clothes, and even became a parent for one who is now a permanent part of her family. She has been a huge advocate for students in the debate as to whether or not we should open schools this fall, and how Stefanie got on our radar. She recently wrote a letter to Governor Kate Brown, the state school board, Oregon legislatures, and Jefferson County commissioners, arguing that local communities and school boards should decide when to open schools in their own communities, asking to eliminate the one-size-fits-all state mandate for schools. Stefanie, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, Stefanie, what originally drew you to education?
Mrs. Wagner. So we moved a lot between North Dakota and California 5 times. And then in 6th grade, I had Mrs. Wagner, and she truly loved every single student in the room, and you could feel it. And that was the year I decided I know what I want to be when I grow up.
And then your family raised bucking bulls in Powell Butte. At least I understand that's correct. How did you get into that side of things?
Oh my, how much time do we have? A longer story. So from 6th grade on, I lived in Tigard, Oregon, and city girl marries country boy I was on a blind date over here to Central Oregon. We ended up getting married, and when I married Keith, he was a general contractor and a professional rodeo judge. He had finished his rodeo competitor career, and it was all brand new to me. And then he wanted to get into the last aspect of it, and that was raising the animals. And so we had a partnership with the neighbor that we took care of all their cattle, and in return they paid us in cattle. So that's how we started growing our herd. And then you start getting the right bloodlines, and he did it on the side as a hobby, and he ended up being really, really successful. He made it up to the top level of the Built Ford Tough PBR, professional bull riders, like the NFL, but for bull riders.
Right.
And it was really amazing, and it was a great way to raise kids. And but unfortunately, in 2016, he unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. And it's a huge financial burden. So when you raise cattle, you sell them, right? You make money. Well, the bulls, you keep them.
Ideally, right?
So it's just you just have to keep putting money in it. And I had an 11 and a 13-year-old, and financially, I just couldn't keep it going. Yeah, but it was an excellent way to raise kids, and it was certainly a thrilling way to spend your weekends.
It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And well, speaking of riding bulls, then how did you come from moving from teacher to superintendent?
That's a very relevant analogy. So I was a teacher in Redmond School District, and I had decided that I wanted to learn and grow some more. So I was in my 3rd day of classes. The University of Oregon had started a brand new cohort where they actually came to Central Oregon to grow administrators. And so I was in my 3rd day, and this gal comes to me at lunch, and she's like, "You need to come to Culver. We have an elementary position open to be the principal, and you need to interview." And I was like, can you even do that? I don't have the degree. And so I went ahead and did it, and I thought I was just getting good interview experience, and they hired me. And so I was like, okay. And so that was an amazing journey. And I was a very happy elementary principal here. And then our superintendent left really late in the school year. She left in May and told the board in May of 2009 that she was leaving. Well, usually a superintendent search is a 6 to 10 month process. And so the board came to me and said, everyone appreciates you, and you have the trust since you have all the littles. Would you take on being interim superintendent too? And I was like, no, who would want that job? And I really said no. And then I am faith-based, so I prayed about it. And over the next 2 weeks, I learned that I was probably just supposed to do it. And so originally I said, okay, I will do it, but 1 year. You got me 1 year. And I was so terrible that first year that after the year was over, I'm like, wait, I need a do-over. And so that was 12 years ago. So I remained both for 12 years. I just love this place.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about the science, technology, engineering, and math program you started in Culver in coordination with OSU.
Yeah, so in my intro, you had shared that I mentored a lot of kids. For some reason, I am just in love with the underdogs. And every kid needs a champion, and some kids don't have that. And so I started actually through the bull riding industry. I would find these boys, or I would learn of these boys at the high school that weren't really successful. And one of them I used, if you'll work with me and we get all your grades to passing, you can go to a PBR with my family. And so I bribe them. And that young man was told his best bet was to drop out, and guess what? He graduated. So then after that, the next year I got another boy, and I realized that they would come for only certain class periods and skip others. And so I would start to try and figure out what is it about the ones that they come to. Well, it was our hands-on STEM class. We had one period of it at our high school, and they did some really cool projects like building a paddle wheel down at Lake Billy Chinook in the irrigation canal that still to this day powers the lights for the check-in kiosk. So they were doing all these hands-on, purposeful, real world cool stuff. And those boys would never miss that period. And so I started to think, all right, we need more of this. And then so we started to do a few more projects, and I watched kids just get on fire for what they were doing, because really our education system for a century has been, you sit in a desk, you learn this amount of information, and we test you on it, and we give you the credits, and everybody has to get the same credits. You know, in our world today, really, if you have a device and the internet, you can learn anything. And so I had drafted this brainstorm idea, and I kind of I made an appointment. I had heard that OSU Cascades had just hired a STEM instructor and kind of a coordinator. And so I met with him. I didn't tell anybody I was meeting with him, and I slid my idea across the desk, and I said, here's an idea I have for a K-12 transformation of a small school district. And I asked him, am I crazy? Or what do you think? And he said, no, you're not crazy at all. And he had just come from back east from a school district just like that. And so, oh my gosh, whirlwind. So within 6 months, we wrote grants, and we had $750,000 in grants.
Wow.
Yeah, and we rock and rolled for 2 years. We had amazing professional development for the teachers, graduate level coursework, and we had all these community partners. That's the key with STEM, is that you have a community partner that has a problem that needs fixing, and you assign kids to fix it. And so kindergartners worked with the local Humane Society. So they made dog toys and dog biscuits. So every adopted dog went away with a care package made by Culver Kinders. And they engineered the dog toys with tennis balls and rope and whatever they thought could work, and all the way up to just incredible things that have happened at our high school and middle school. I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, is it 3 years ago now, when the Lake Billy Chinook, the Cove, was on fire and all the campground and everything burned. Our middle schoolers were part of restoring all of that.
And
like
what have you seen from the kids during this kind of class, like when they get in there? Because, you know, so much.
They're on fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a class period isn't long enough. So they just kept begging for more time, and you find them after school working on something or asking, can I take a device home so I can work on this over the weekend and we can come in on Monday? They just forget time and space, and they're so into it. And so that is why the whole crux of we went K-12. But guess what? When the money goes away, so do all the extra resources. And so it's been difficult. We still have STEM K-8, kindergarten through 8th grade, and they still have partners and different things because the teachers love it too. And at the high school, it fights with all the required courses that kids need to graduate. So there are some offerings, but it wasn't school-wide like it was for those 2 years.
So speaking of funding, can you tell us a little bit about the socioeconomic makeup of families in your district and what makes Culver unique?
Yeah, we have about 600 and, well, depending on the year, 650 to 700 students. And about 65% of them are high poverty. And then about 17% are English as a second language, and 8% are homeless. Homeless has a different definition. So if you're in multiple families in one house, that is considered homeless. Likewise, manufactured homes before 1982 are considered homeless. So they might have a dwelling, it's just considered substandard. But nevertheless, it's still, they don't have the access to resources. Yeah.
So let's dive in and talk a little bit about the pandemic and school reopenings. In a recent guest commentary, which was also the letter to the governor that we published in the source, you talked about surveying families in your district to see if they wanted to reopen. So what did you learn from that process?
Right. So in the end of June, when the Oregon Department of Education came out with 3 options that school districts could pick, we surveyed our parents, and 89.7% of our parents, even though there's risk with COVID, they wanted in the fall, they wanted their kids on campus. And then 11% wanted their students to stay at home but do online learning. And then 3 families wanted paper pencil, no online, but keep their kids at home. And we stood ready to serve all 3 of those methods at that time. And then, of course, as our state knows, then the governor came out in August and said it will all be distance learning.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, and I know you've been critical of distant learning. If I could just read what you wrote to the American Academy of Pediatrics, you said schools are fundamental to child development and well-being and provide our children with academic instruction, social and emotional skills, safety, reliable nutrition, physical, speech, and mental health therapy, and opportunities for physical activity, among other benefits. Then you wrote, we are going to abolish all of that for a risk of less than 1%. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So that what you just read, the American Academy of Pediatric Doctors wrote that, at the national level. The CDC also has a similar statement. And just out of curiosity, yesterday I did calculate how many children have COVID now. Children are getting it. And 9 or younger as of yesterday in Oregon, 0.003% have gotten it ever. And ages 10 to 19, it's 0.005. So it's still much less than 1%. And we haven't had any deaths yet of children. And so I just think that after watching all spring, we are small, so we are afforded opportunity to know where our kids are and what they're doing at a much easier rate than like a Bend Lapine. And so watching the students suffer, and I personally went and delivered bags of food, not just the lunch and breakfast. I'm talking food to sustain the whole family.
Sure.
And it's, yeah, all those needs that kids are wired for, social, food, learning, all of those things. I would say distance learning, we should call it distance practicing, because it put all parents in the position of being a teacher. And depending on the skill set, that was either successful or not. And really, you had to have a stay-at-home parent to make it work. For youngers, the older kids can be more responsible and get online for themselves, but we have homes with no internet access, so we would go out and buy hotspots and pay for it and try and make everything work. And some families just really said, we are not doing school here.
Yeah, I remember you had, I forget where I read it, but just a grandmother who was responsible for taking care of her kids, and just in frustration had come in and just given you all the supplies back and just let you know simply,
Yeah.
and honestly, that's not something that I can do, and these kids will not be educated going forward.
Yeah, it was heart-wrenching, because I did sit with her side by side twice, trying to teach her to get her elementary students on the device. How do you do it? How do you use it? And she came in and she said, I'm a failure to my grandson. I can't do this. And yeah, it's really hard.
In your experience, when you get together with colleagues and other teachers and stuff, are there conversations being had that kind of, to me, it just seems like a given that this system is so much less than what kids were being offered. But have you heard from other educators that this is a great model that we're moving to, or isn't it awesome that we're doing online learning? I mean, because I don't hear that, but I'm not necessarily in the education field.
I haven't heard it where I work. I have heard, trying to figure out the best way to phrase this. So maybe I should start with my view of the COVID and all of that. I have never one day been in fear. And so your comfort level regarding the virus or your susceptibility or all of those sorts of things then guides, your views of things.
Absolutely.
And so I have not been in fear. And so to me, it is not a massive risk to bring kids back on campus. But people who are in fear that gathering children or gathering anyone will transmit the virus. And so I do know my sister's a teacher over in the Valley, and she has shared the views of a lot of her colleagues, and they are scared and they don't want to be in the classroom. That's why I feel so blessed to be in Culver. We're pretty gritty. We're pretty tough, and we love the kids, and everybody wants to be here. Yeah.
When we talk about the a lot of times in this conversation, and especially in a hard moment like this, how do you balance the well-being of the teachers versus the well-being of the students? I mean, especially in your district where we're talking about that kind of poverty with the, government assistance that comes in the form of just simply these kids being with other kids and with adults that they're not getting on their own. Um, if you could give me some insight into how that conversation is going on amongst colleagues.
We have some of all, we have, so to reference, we have about 45 teachers and we have about 90 employees total. So that includes bus drivers, that includes nutrition services, everyone. And I have to say that if I had to guess, we didn't formally survey, but last spring we did not close our building because the essential workers could be in their buildings and almost everybody was here. And you can get a sense of fear or no fear. And they were just begging for their kids to come back. And we all at that time were saying, oh, this really stinks, but at least in the fall, we'll be back to normal. And so when we weren't back to normal, it's really upsetting to our folks. And there are just a couple that need accommodation. So we're willing to accommodate all the comfort levels. And some folks might be teaching from home, and we'll have another grown-up, a staff member in the classroom with a pod of 10, and they'll do it that way. We're willing to accommodate wherever the comfort level is, but I haven't heard anyone that says, yeah, we just need to all stay home or anything like that. And most of them, so Culver's small. So like when you see people around and people still hug and people still, well, I have to share with
But you do have 45 teachers. So as a percentage, it's just extrapolated. And I do think that there's characteristics to all regions, but you're saying of your teachers to a person, they're all willing to come back?
Yeah, well, just a handful are currently, actually, they don't come back till Monday. So they're still on summer break. So I invited them all that if they needed to or desired any accommodations, in the new governor's mandate, they are expected to come back to work and on site. And so if they need special accommodations or in the high risk category, they're to work with our personnel director on what those accommodations are. And so far, a lot of them have just been, they just need reassurance that the cleaning is going to happen and the sanitizing is going to happen. This is kind of, somebody said the term the other day, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is exactly what we're doing, taking a drink out of a fire hose. Like so much is coming at us that we have never done before. And every day there's like probably, I would say 50 questions asked. And I don't know the answer to any but 5, but I'll get back to you is my favorite term. Yeah.
So you made a proposal to the Oregon Department of Education about changing the way they calculate the restrictions by zip code instead of county.
Right.
Can you talk about that and also your proposal to come back on Mondays?
Yeah, you mean the one that got denied on Saturday, that proposal? Yeah. So we just couldn't stand it to go full-time distance learning, because if you're going to be a brand new middle schooler, we feel like the relationship you build with those teachers is paramount to your success. Likewise, if you are an 8th grader and it's going to be your first year in high school, how do you navigate all online? And so, and with our lack of success in distance learning in the spring, our proposal was that all students would be on site on Mondays. And then in the guidance, you can pull in groups of 10. So on Mondays, we see everybody, and then we could see who was really struggling, and we could pull them in the other 4 days periodically to support them with whatever their need would be. Some kids just need social emotional help, some are struggling and not doing any academic work. Whatever their need, the Oregon Department of Education gave a wide range of what you could pull them in for. So we thought if we could get eyes on them, and see the whites of their eyes and get a sense of how they are, then we could line them out for the rest of the week better. Parents that
Sure.
we could anyway, and hold them accountable, because you're coming back the next Monday. So you better have this stuff done.
Right.
And so that was our proposal. We knew it was a risk, but it did mitigate exposure down 80%. If we only saw them 1 out of 5 days, that's anyway, but it was denied. So
amongst your students, how many students in your district?
About 670.
And how many, what is your guesstimate into how many of those students you're going to lose under this new system? What was your attrition rate before compared to what you're estimating your attrition rate's going to be now?
Yeah, so we were growing again for the last 2 years, 3 years. And now just today, 22 withdrawal forms over the last week have come to the district. The parents are going to do online charter school.
Wow. And as you see that as an increasing, and how does online charter school differ from the kind of offerings that you're going to offer? Is this like something out of Pittsburgh or, wherever?
Yeah. So there's all sorts of different ones that
Right.
they're signing up for. I think it's just what they do. So they're probably sharper at it. Some charter schools are more, like textbook online type based, and then others actually have a teacher that's on and instructing and all those sorts of things.
But how many kids do you estimate, aside from the people who are finding other alternative educational opportunities? But like you were talking about, the STEM program brings people into your classrooms because it's hands-on, and that's important for a lot of kids, especially for learners who are physical or, have that as their preference. So, but you're going to lose those. I'm always stunned that we don't calculate the loss of those kind of learners into the equation.
Yeah. Well, we kept the United States Postal Service super busy all spring because teachers, oh my gosh, these teachers are amazing. They would concoct hands-on learning and put it in Ziploc bags, and we bought those big Tyvek white envelopes. And it was sometimes $12 an envelope, but we sent them so that kids could still have more than just paper pencil learning. And I'm super proud of the teachers, but it's not something you want to do for a year.
Well, and Stefanie, I got to think that that's not standard operating procedure for districts around the state.
So I do know now, when districts found out that they were doing comprehensive distance learning, a lot of districts are purchasing a virtual curriculum. So Florida has a really good one, a Florida virtual curriculum. It's already done. And so then teachers go in and just pick what they want to use, and the online platform is established. I honestly have just peeked at it. I didn't look in depth because I'm selfish. I kind of love that our teachers, are able to customize per kid, and they're willing to. We have a independent life skills program, and so those are children with severe disabilities. Oh my gosh, that teacher was doing the same thing. She was cutting out all these little squares so that to practice the words, what they would do in the classroom is you pull the letter. They can't write necessarily, and so you pull the letter, to spell. She was cutting them all out. These teachers did whatever it took to meet the students' needs. And we worried that one canned curriculum, and honestly, maybe it is amazing and I didn't check into it enough. One canned curriculum like that, you can't cater to the individual kid needs. But again, we're spoiled because size matters. We just have 2 classes of every grade, so you can get very personal.
That's great.
Are any families organizing pods in the district? Like learning?
Oh my goodness, yes. So I just learned of 6, I think it's 6 families that put out an advertisement because they're hiring a certified teacher that will come teach all these children. I don't know where. So that obviously there's a financial cost to that. There's another amazing grandma. She's a first grader's grandma who was a former teacher. So the little first grader and some of her friends, these families have all bound together. And so I think there's going to be 5 students that this retired teacher grandma is going to have every day.
Great.
And so they're organizing these things, which I think is super creative. And those kids will get the social part of it, you know, they'll get fed, all those things. But our poorest families don't have the means to make any of that happen.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask you is, do you feel in this environment the increasing sense of the haves and have-nots as, you know, people can afford these pods and they can afford great curriculums from these, you know, schools where, I mean, in your district, you have a lot of kids who are just going to check out. I mean, to be honest.
That is very honest, and it's what keeps me up at night. It's what's on my heart 24/7. This really does magnify the discrepancy of resources, and those typically at risk or left behind, the gap is greater. And so that is why I am just on fire that somehow they have to be on campus.
Sure.
It's their greatest hope of equalizing, you know, and they get fed and it's stable and they know what they can count on.
Stefanie, we are out of time. Are you anything you'd like to touch on before we end the?
Yeah, so we just, right before I got on here, sent out a survey. We are able to gather groups of 10 for 2 hours a day. And so we are, because of our size, we are able to accommodate any child that wants to come onto campus, any family that wants their kids on campus. And we sent out the survey, and it's kind of like the slot machine, like it just sits ding, 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 ding. And so we're watching, the families have 3 options. They have the distance learning with coming on site for 2 hours a day. There's a morning session and afternoon, kind of like the old-fashioned morning kindergarten, afternoon kindergarten, because we have to do 2 full bus routes. So we had to leave time. And Oregon Department of Ed only allows 2 hours. But because we're small, we fit all their guidelines. So parents are currently, as we are talking, filling out the surveys and picking if they want to do the distance learning with the on-site 2 hours a day, full distance learning online, or packet only. So at least those families that want their kids to be on campus, I know 2 hours isn't enough, but it's a place to start.
Stefanie, it's been terrific talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time with everything you've got going on right now. And I really appreciate the work you're putting in.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you, Stefanie. Thanks for coming.
This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. We appreciate you listening.